All right, check the mic. Instant reaction to Monday Night Football. Yes, it's Tuesday morning. I was at the Bengals game last night, so we had to do it this morning, Sam. But man, I thought it was a great night of football despite the blowout in the first half of the doubleheader. There's a lot to talk about in the Jags-Bills game, but man, what a game. Commanders 38, Bengals 33. Jayden Daniels is going to be the story for everybody. It finishes 21 of 23 for 254, 2 touchdowns, no picks, another several carries. I mean, the official number is 12 carries for 39 yards, a couple of kneel downs in there, but unbelievable game for the offenses. The offense is fighting back here, Sam.
Yeah, across the board except for Jacksonville. When I was texting you, let's start with the Buffalo Jacksonville game and just get that out of the way because that was the less interesting one. But I was texting you while you were at the Bengals game, wondering whether by design or mistake or just happy accident, whether Buffalo have actually crafted this offense to perfectly fight back against 2024 defenses, right? This, let's keep everything underneath. Let's work shallow. Let's do the horizontal game. Let's run the ball. Like we were questioning whether they were going to be able to survive without a true number one X wide receiver, a guy that can win on the outside, win deep down the field. And they had this entire army full of slot guys. Right now, that seems like what you want. That's the area of the field you want to be attacking in. And they were just murdering Jacksonville from literally the first play. Like the very first play was James Cook out of the backfield, just a complete breakdown of Jacksonville defense. And they had an easy, comfortable gain, first down, et cetera, et cetera. And it just kept going. I mean, Jacksonville completely inept, couldn't stop anything Buffalo were doing. The Bills were destroying them. And I checked the timestamp on the text, but I texted you at 7:48 saying the Jags may be about to get absolutely wrecked in this game. And that's exactly what happened.
I wasn't even at my seat yet because I brought my iPad to the game so I could watch that. So I watched Jags Bills. I had my iPad at the game while I was watching the Bengals Commanders live. I hadn't even sat down yet, and you're like, this game's going to be a blowout. So I went back and, watched. It was. I mean, so we talked about that the offseason for the Bills, right? The way they built this team and said, okay, you're going to replace Stephon Diggs. Is Keon Coleman going to be a like-for-like replacement to Stephon Diggs? You talked about Coleman during the draft process as maybe as a better big slot, a guy that just has all those good punt returns. He just has a really good feel for after the catch ability. I go back to what Brandon Beane said when they drafted Khalil Shakir. That was a few years ago now, and he said, "Look, we need more yak ability." And I think it was the following year they added James Cook. They wanted a little bit more dynamism out of the running back position after having guys like Devin Singletary. It does feel like this culmination of the way the Bills have built their team. You have Dalton Kincaid as a big slot. So say what you want about what Keon Coleman is. He could be a slot, he could be outside, but Dalton Kincaid, big slot, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel, the way they use their running backs, man. I mean, James Cook dropped what could have been a touchdown as well coming out of the backfield. They're using their running backs really well out of the backfield. But yeah, they are looking really sharp, obviously, offensively, and the way they've built this team. As you mentioned, I came to the same conclusion watching separately from you that it just feels like a very 2024 offense by the Bills.
Yeah, and I don't know whether that was, deliberately or whether that was just the happy accident. But either way, this might be actually, that we were kind of speculating heading into the season, this might be a tough year for Buffalo relative to contenders, right? Like they'll still make the playoffs, they'll still be good. But actually, this might be a harder year than normal to try and get by the gauntlet of the AFC and win the Super Bowl. Actually, now, after 3 weeks, maybe they're better positioned than usual because suddenly they have this offense that, okay, it's always been good, but it seems to be unusually well designed right now to combat what is happening right now in the NFL in 2024.
On the other side, there are going to be some questions in Jacksonville. I mean, this starting 0-3, I had not seen the quote by owner Shad Khan that he assumes or he was predicting or expecting this to be the best team in Jaguars history that Mike Florio put out there last night. First of all, for the record, the 1999 and 2000 Jaguars are the best team in history. The 99 team went 14-2, lost in the AFC Championship. The 2000 team was the same team, just very disappointing. They didn't make the playoffs, but that was the best crafted Jags team in history. But yeah, I think question about hot seat stuff, like there has to be in Jacksonville. I mean, there may not be a more disappointing team in the NFL. I know the Bengals are 0-3, but over the last year plus. This isn't just this year. This was the collapse last season for Jacksonville as well. They're now 1-8 in their last 9 games with Trevor Lawrence starting. It is
8
not
straight
going
losses
well
for Lawrence. Yeah,
it is, and he's starting to look. There was points where you could make excuses for him and players letting him down, and you say maybe there's a little something missing with Trevor Lawrence, but he's still very good. He's starting to look like regressing a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, his interception where he just airmailed Brian Thomas Jr. over the middle, that's a bad play. Lawrence is not, he's not looking like part of the solution right now, and he's looking like a part of the problem across the board. Obviously, it's not just him. Like, Jacksonville is terrible. And yeah, the Bengals are 0-3 as well, and we'll get to them in a little bit, but at least the Bengals stood up and gave it to the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs are arguably the best team in the NFL. The Bengals were a play away from winning that game. So at least 0-3 comes with the caveat of we know that they're capable of going toe-to-toe with the best teams in football. Jacksonville just looks bad, like across the board. And this was an annihilation. And what was, I was saying, I don't know if it'll happen. We're early Tuesday morning, but that was the kind of game that gets people fired, right? Remember, we've had these games over the last few years where absolute destruction, and you're like, it changes opinions, right? It changes ownership opinions. It changes general manager opinions. And what was clear is how early on it was going that way. Like, very early in that game, we're like, oh, this is like, go home, forget it. We might as well switch on to the next game. It was genuinely almost perfectly timed that you could just turn it off. We can go straight to the Bengals game, switch off the other TV. We don't need it anymore. I know how that game is going. It's just what the numbers will be at the end of it. Like, that is concerning because that's the kind of thing that's difficult to pull yourself out of.
Yeah, the other part too, it affects the nice clean narrative that, Urban Meyer was there in 2021. That was one of the worst situations in NFL history by all accounts. Doug Peterson comes in 22, rights the ship. It took about half the season. They still end up making the playoffs, winning a playoff game. And then 23, the first half of the season, they are really going like this, right? They went up the roller coaster, and now they're back down the roller coaster, and maybe not as rock bottom as the Urban Meyer era, because, no reports that Doug Peterson's kicking kickers or anything like that, but it's getting close from a results standpoint as far as the Jags go. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that situation there. It's also, I texted this to you last night too. It's odd to me that Doug Peterson's had an interesting career as head coach, right? He has a Super Bowl win with the Eagles, was one of the first coaches to really embrace the aggressiveness on fourth down that's taken over the league. Seemingly was a great coach for young quarterbacks like Carson Wentz, who looked like an MVP candidate in his second season in the NFL under Doug Peterson. And then for whatever reason, that just fell apart in Philadelphia. Then he comes in, kind of salvages Trevor Lawrence's career for that top part of the roller coaster. And now we're back here where things have fallen apart again. Something about the sustainability right now of Doug Peterson may be in question, for Jags fans right now.
I mean, remember, Peterson is kind of out of the Andy Reid coaching tree, and that entire coaching tree went through like a little cycle where it was in vogue, and, we had everybody that was associated with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes was getting hired for jobs. Matt Nagy, the hot young coaching staff, Peterson. And it was right at the time where RPOs started to explode, and that was a big part of NFL offense. And then it was almost like once NFL defenses figured out how to defend RPOs, that offense, other than Andy Reid, stopped functioning. And Matt Nagy became a disaster as a head coach, had to go back to Kansas City. Peterson, gets fired from Philadelphia, has to reboot as well. It was like that coaching tree, like that branch just withered and died as soon as NFL defenses figured out how to stop RPOs. And Andy Reid continues to be the only guy that's just able to reinvent and keep on cooking.
All right, the story coming out of last night, though, was Jayden Daniels. Let's get to that. Commanders 38-33 win over the Bengals. The Commanders are tied for first place in the NFC East. We got a battle for last place on Thursday night in the East with the Giants and the Cowboys, but it's the Commanders and Eagles now sitting at 2-1. Unbelievable, man. I mean, I'm sitting there watching. I'm, tapping. First off, Harry looked at me at one point. He goes, "Dad, there hasn't been a punt in this game." I was like, "You're right, son. There really hasn't been." It's offense, fourth down.
You see the stat on that?
No, I did not.
That was the first game with no turnovers and no punts since, guess.
1973.
1940. That was a pre-war stat that just got broken.
We're watching history. I know the Bengals broke something, right? They're the only team to have 4 touchdowns, no turnovers, and no punts in a game and lose. The teams in the Super Bowl era are now 26-1 when that happens. And I'm not even. I don't even want to acknowledge it. I don't even want it on our Shouty Show segment tomorrow. But there's a bad Shouty Show segment going around already. Calling out Joe Burrow. Calling out Joe Burrow for the Bengals being 0-3 right now. That's
exactly the kind of thing we want.
Janko, don't even acknowledge what Chris Canty is saying out there about this being like he literally must have gone to bed at 10 o'clock last night and not watched this game. But man, Jayden Daniels' stat line is insane. And it to me, it felt like one of those Lamar. I got 2 takes on it, right? It was one of those Lamar hyper efficient games, right? Where there was a point where he was like 9 for 10. He ends up 21 for 23. And look, if the pass wasn't there, he just scrambled and picked up yards, right? EPA was through the roof because all he did was go positive play after positive play after positive play. And I still can't get over that final throw. The Bengals had one of the worst pass rush games I've ever seen. That is also true. We'll talk about that in a second. But that final throw, the Bengals had to blitz. They had to heat him up, and it didn't matter. Daniels, in the face of pressure, with this much room to get the throw off, throws an absolute pinpoint touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin in the end zone. I mean, that was unreal. And, of course, the stadium absolutely deflates, but I still can't get over how good that throw was by Jayden Daniels after he already played an incredible game.
He did. And the funny thing is, like, that stat line could have been even better. One of the 2 incompletions was he was just late on a deep ball over the middle where Terry McLaurin was one-on-one with a DB as well. That would have been another 50-yard touchdown bomb.
Yep.
And he was late putting it in the air. Like he sort of panicked a little bit, waited to see it, and by the time he put it in the air, it was gone and it was inaccurate. But had he been on the money with that one the same way he was on the money with everything else, that's another 50-yard touchdown added to the stat line. And we're talking about one of the greatest performances of all time statistically. He was phenomenal. And you're right. Some of those passes were absolutely beautiful. Exactly like what we saw from him in college, where his accuracy on the deep ball was spectacular. Terry McLaurin, they were putting up graphics of like all the quarterbacks that have completed passes to Terry McLaurin. It's a sad list of passers. And suddenly the guy's finally got his quarterback. He's finally got Jayden Daniels. Terry McLaurin might cook like he never cooked before now based off that game. And, Washington's backfield, Brian Robinson Jr., Austin Eckler looks revived now that he's healthy. And Jayden Daniels, that trio in the backfield, Thunder, Lightning, and whatever Jayden Daniels is on top of that, like Washington's offense is not to be messed around with. And okay, the defense may be the weak link, but clearly it's better coached than it was a year ago. And they were causing at least some problems for what should be a good offense in Joe Burrow and the Bengals.
The other insane stat to come out of this was the second straight week Washington's offense scored on every possession. Remember last week they scored on 6 straight. It was all field goals last year, but they've scored on every possession over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I couldn't get – again, it reminded me of those Lamar Jackson games where Lamar would go 16 for 20, right? Didn't have to pass all that much. And then every time he ran, it was, some level of positive yardage. I mean, that as I'm watching it, I'm saying, okay, unbelievable Jayden Daniels. And, that drive at the end, like the Bengals offense was not stopped either for the most part. Joe Burrow played great every time the Commanders rolled to single high. I'm over there like, Harry, they just rolled to single high. Watch Jamar Chase on that first touchdown and nailed it. So the Bengals offense was great too. But Washington kept on that on their final drive, converting third downs, converting, deflating the stadium, thwarting any comeback attempts. Because, I thought if the Bengals defense made one stop, they had a chance to come back and win this game. This was one of those that type of shootout. But I can't say enough good things about Jayden Daniels. So let's all take this the right way. But 2 things are true here. He was unbelievable, and he was also throwing from LSU pockets. I mean, he was throwing from college-level pockets. Trey Hendrickson was battling injury. He's already been the only pass rusher for the Bengals to have any kind of success this year. And that was true again last night. He had the 1 sack, but that was it. And I did look it up. First run PFF grades. We'll see what happens when it finalizes. It felt like the worst pass rush game I'd seen all season. It's going to go down as the lowest graded PFF pass rush game for any team this year. Both things are true. Daniels was incredible, but man, that Bengals pass rush was absolutely horrific. And Jayden Daniels working from clean pockets the entire night, and with a lot of space in the pocket as well.
I mean, I think this game kind of exposed a potential real issue with the Bengals defense this year. I think the offense showed that it can be fine. It can get back on track. You know, they snapped out of it against Kansas City. They looked more competent. And this game, they were pretty good. You know, now you've got Chase back. You've got T. Higgins there. You've got Josivas making plays as well. So they've actually got a pretty good offense. Joe Burrow may not be playing his best football, but he's playing well. But the defense, you're like, if Trey Hendrickson doesn't absolutely dominate, there's nobody else that's going to get pressure. On the back end, those guys are getting exposed, those young DBs that we're talking about, because they don't have the pass rush pressure getting the heat and, you know, taking the pressure off them. They have to hold up. And they've got some, some guys that have been beaten. Like that last play, it's excusable. Like you understand why they did it. It was 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 9 or whatever it was. And they ran a double move. So the DB, was it Dax Hill, is playing the sticks. Like he's playing the first down throw. And they were like, no, we're going for it all. We're not going for the first down. We're going for the touchdown. I get it. But like a top tier corner can't give up that play. And the Bengals are giving up those plays consistently.
He's still right there. He's still right there. I think that's all Daniels and McLaurin, though. He's still there with him. He put the throw in a perfect spot. Mailbox.
He's right there because McLaurin has to kind of like slow him up a little bit, but he's toast. Like he's barbecued on that play.
I know. It's still, I mean, again, I given the way Cincinnati's pass rush was so bad the entire game, to me, they made the right call. You have to get the ball out of his hands and say, go ahead, make this incredible throw with the game on the line. And they did it. I mean, to me, on that play, you just have to credit Washington. But I think the entire game goes both ways to me. Jayden Daniels and that offense was incredible. He brings that run threat that we knew. Right? He brings that run threat that opens things up for the running backs. You have to account for him both as a scrambler. He's got enough mobility in the pocket that you have to account for him. And this could be part of it too. When I'm talking about the Bengals pass rush being so bad, Daniels is one of those guys that you have to mush rush it a little bit, right? I mean, you have to be very careful because of his pocket quickness and speed that he could break contain. And that's I think defenses are going to start accounting for that more and more. That's going to open up the pass game even more for Jayden Daniels. I don't know if he's going to make those special, perfect deep throws that he made last night every single week, but it was impressive. By the way, for Walt, Cornelius Lucas is the starting left tackle for the Washington Commanders, not Brandon Coleman.
I think I think the happiest I saw Dan Quinn in that entire game was when Jayden Daniels slid. Like he took off scrambling, got a first down, made a guy miss, and then actually slid, didn't fall over, didn't jump, like actually slid. And Dan Quinn is like elated on the sideline.
Joanna knows. The greatest thing about Daniels from last night, he learned how to slide. I mean, that was one of our questions. I'm sorry. I got some old school plug it in. It's part of my new look.
It's the black on black. It does make it look like you're wearing a pair of dangly earrings. It's quite fetching.
Oh, okay. It's because the black. Okay. Just making sure it's not like that every single week or every single time here. Do you put Bailey's in your coffee, or are you not that Irish?
No,
you have Bailey's in there right now.
Certainly not 9:20 when you got to go meet Neil later.
Are you going to see Neil? Huh? Is that what you do? Are you okay working on your off day here on Tuesday? Sorry, I made you do that.
I know. It's rough. It's a grind. We all got to do it.
What happens with the Bengals here, right? I mean, the whole. I've been sticking to this narrative. Hey, they go 0-2 every year, but they figure it out in week 3. And in week 3 last year,
they did.
They had Monday Night Football. They figured it out, and they beat the Rams.
But then they lost the next game, so they still went 1-3 last year. So if they win next week, they're still level with a year ago. It's still fine, right?
And even though I was just going to say, even though they didn't make the playoffs last year, Joe Burrow got hurt. There was the stretch in the middle of the season where you were like, hey, this is the best team in football, right? This is the best team in football. For 4 or 5 weeks, they took it to the 49ers and looked great. Again, they looked like the team from the previous 2 years.
And a couple of weeks ago, you'd be like, great, week 4, we're going against Carolina, not a problem. Chalk the W up. We're already 1-3. Move on. Like, who's in the week 5 schedule? Now you're like, Andy Dalton just lit up the Raiders. Week 4 became a lot more difficult last week.
Yeah.
So it's not terminal. Like, I know the stats and et cetera are horrendous if you're this, like if you lose 3 straight. It is, however, like they can come back from this, but there's no margin for error anymore. Like, you have to go and beat Carolina, even though Andy Dalton's just showed that they're actually a pretty good football team, certainly on offense, now that they have a viable quarterback. Like, they have to beat basically every good team remaining on their schedule and go on the kind of run that they went on last season. And Joe Burrow can't get hurt again. He has to start cooking. So, it's 0-3. There's no way of positively spinning that. Like, it's terrible. But the fact that they showed against Kansas City they are capable of playing against the best and being at that level is important. We know that they're able to do it, but now they have no more margin for error. They can't be a play away anymore. They've got to make that play. They've got to get over the line and win these games.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I said, the Bengals defense was awful last night. The Commanders offense was great. But the Bengals defense had also, I mean, they are setting all kinds of records this season. The 275 passing yards that they gave up over the first 2 weeks while being 0-2 was a record. They held Mahomes to his lowest passing total in a game that he started and finished, and they still managed to lose the game. So it's not like everything's been bad play for Cincinnati this year. But, I mean, 0-3, this is going to be tough to dig out of.
But, for example, let me just go Michael Renner here and read the schedule for a moment, right? We go away to Carolina. We take the Ravens at home, away to the Giants, away to the Browns, Eagles at home, Raiders at home, Ravens on the road, Chargers, Steelers, Cowboys, Titans, Browns, Broncos, Steelers. There's nobody on that schedule you're like, they can't beat that team.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
That's a guaranteed L. So the toughest games on that schedule are the Eagles at home. So, home field advantage. They split, obviously, the series with the Ravens at home. You've got the Steelers, obviously, split, and Dallas, maybe, depending on what they do on the road. It's not the hardest schedule in the world, right? Like, if they are a good team, if they expect to make the playoffs, to be a contender, to actually do anything, they can beat every team on that record, right? They won't, but they can. So it's not terminal, but it's, again, margin of error is 0 at this stage.
Now, week 3 weeks into the season, Cowboys 1-2, Ravens 1-2, Bengals 0-3, Jags 0-3, 49ers 1-2. Man, it's tough. This is it's parity around the NFL plus the Chiefs, but ton of parity. I mean, if the Chiefs didn't exist, it'd be real. I mean, how wide open would the NFL have been these last couple of years?
Yeah, or the Bills. Our guy Josh Dubow from the AP, the Associated Press, quarterbacks that are 3-0 this season: Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Sam Darnold, Justin Fields, Geno Smith.
As expected.
Gets pretty weird pretty quickly.
It does. Man, I just enjoyed the football last night for all the defense. Lack of passing attack and everything we've seen this year. That was one of the better, just pure offensive games that you'll see.
We've spent time talking about the games itself. How was the jungle? How was the stadium? How was the experience? Steve?
It was great
on location.
I was joking with you before. I mean, they get all, you get all hyped up at the game. Like, of course, I've been to games before, but I was joking. Like, how does a road team ever even get in here? They get so hyped up. Everybody was ready to go. Monday Night Football. The whole city was fired up. But boy, was it deflated once they got out of there. There was a good group of Commanders fans. There was a point that I really, in my section, I just wanted to start like tweeting out what everybody was saying. The guy behind me that was a Commanders fan was like, man, prevent defense prevents you from winning, as the Commanders start giving up touchdowns late. Like, they're in like cover 1 man coverage, it's just fun. It was fun. It was a good experience though. We had a lot of fun. Harry had fun, and it was a great game. It was a great game to go to. The jungle. Nice. Corey Dillon added to the Ring of Honor. No Mike Brown added to the Ring of Honor last night. He did not add himself, but it was all good. So my friend Willie Anderson helped induct Corey Dillon over there. So great night at the jungle, and appreciate everybody being here on a Tuesday morning with our instant reaction.
Is that
Anything
it?
else?
Done?
That's it. Anything else from you guys? Trevor Lawrence hasn't earned his contract, according to John Jay. What do you do with Trevor Lawrence, Sam?
Well, you're stuck with him now, right? You got to make it work. It is legitimate that if he hadn't got given the $55 million contract, we would be having serious discussions about what kind of deal is Trevor Lawrence worth now.
He's played good football before, though. I mean, it's not like that's the difference.
Much of it, though.
Yeah. There's an email question.
His resume at this stage is a lot more bad than it is good. Now, the good is there. Like, the ceiling is still very high, but we are dealing with a pretty small sample size of high-end play and a lot of play. It's kind of like Baker Mayfield, where you're trying to, like, stack up all the excuses, and once you take away all the excuses, what are you actually left with? It's like the guy's been in the NFL for this amount of time, and we're left with, like, an 8-game sample size of high-end play. Like, that's not ideal.
No, it's not. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Something's got to give in Jacksonville at this point. All right, you got anything else?
No.
It's our Monday Night Football instant reaction. We appreciate everybody being here. Hit that thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button. I already know about 35% of you are subscribed. That's it. That means about 65% of you are not subscribed to our YouTube channel. It's just unacceptable. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but we would appreciate it if you hit the thumbs up on the way out. And we'll be back again tomorrow, our normal Wednesday show. I think, are we 3 guests? Do we have 3 confirmed guests for tomorrow?
Just 2, I think, right?
Is it 2? Okay. Huge show tomorrow, 10:30 Eastern, right here, live on the YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to your podcast, you get the audio a little bit later. All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. It's